We're going to begin with the Lord Mayor, Miss Sandy Verschoor. So I'll do a little introduction and then we'll begin. The Right Honourable, the Lord Mayor, Miss Sandy Verschoor, has served on council since 2015, first as an area councillor and then as Deputy Lord Mayor before becoming Lord Mayor in 2018. Aside from her work with the City of Adelaide, her multicultural background, her work in the arts, along with her passion for sustainable practices which address climate change issues, make her a very well equipped to lead our capital city in the future. She's a member of the Premier's Climate Change Council and is passionate about Adelaide becoming a carbon neutral city. So please welcome to our webinar, the Right Honourable, the Lord Mayor, Miss Sandy Verschoor. And I'm sure there's lots of clapping happening.
You have to go like this.
That's it, exactly. So I'll just get your presentation up and going.
Thank you. Thank you, Jacob, and also welcome to my fellow speakers, Martin Haese, CEO of Business SA, and of course, former Lord Mayor, and Dr. Stephen Hale from the School of Economics. Mani Napudni, Nadlu Tampandi, Nadlu Ghana, Yatanga Takandi. So in the language of the Ghana people of the Adelaide Plains, I welcome you and also pay my respects to elders past and present, recognising that I am on Ghana country today. So the City of Adelaide has had a long journey actually in sustainability, but one of the main things that we did do is in 2015, when Martin Haese was Lord Mayor, we joined in partnership with the Government of South Australia for a really ambitious target to be one of the world's first carbon neutral cities. In August last year, I led my council to join hundreds of municipalities worldwide in declaring that a climate change should be treated as a national emergency and to communicate the urgency of rapid and meaningful actions to reduce emissions and preparing for the impact of climate change. The global pandemic has shown some incredible ways that people of our city can work together, and this is the sort of joined up approach that we actually need in responding to climate change. Countries are embracing and leading in the sustainability space, creating new employment, both here in Adelaide and throughout the state. And there's lots of new opportunities emerging in the way we power our lives and move around our communities to how we manage resources and to limit waste. And also we have recently started working within the structure of our new strategic plan, and was really pleased that environmental leadership is one of the pillars that underpin our new 2020 to 2024 strategic plan. I think I'll go like this, Jacob, if you can show slides, thank you. There are many examples of green businesses. Adelaide has a growing list of companies that are leading in this space and growing significantly as a result. So that includes Environ, who develop solutions that enable clients to connect, make and store and use energies in ways that make their needs. Suntrix, who help thousands of businesses across Australia reduce carbon emissions. And another example is Jeffries Group, whose purpose is to create value from organics resources to ensure long-term sustainable organics recycling model for our state. In 2017, Jeffries won the Low Carbon Economy Award at the annual Carbon Neutral Adelaide Awards, and they continue to play a key part in developing our circular economy. Thank you, Jacob. Council plays a really critical role in facilitating key partnerships and promoting the growth of low carbon economy and shaping the conversation around our community's shared ambition to become a carbon neutral city. And this is from the awards earlier this year. We're helping the community to develop and take advantage of innovative technologies and service models to look at saving energy and water and waste and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And there are 4 ways that we can help facilitate this change. We can do this through policies and strategic direction, through direct incentives and investment, through our own procurement of goods and services, and through fostering innovative partnerships and approaches. Next slide, thanks, Jacob. So an example of policy setting is the waste and recycling strategy. We have prepared a new strategy which was passed in council last night, which will now go out to consultation. It is a strategy plan that provides a really solid framework to redefine the concept of waste, improve the resource recovery, and also build the circular economy in Adelaide. So not only will the resource recovery help reduce emissions, but it's also economically beneficial. For every 10,000 tonnes of waste recycled, 9.2 jobs are created compared to only 2.8 when that waste is sent to land. So in a time when job disruptions is really high, it's really important that we try and capitalise on opportunities to create employment through the resource recovery sector. Thanks, Jacob. Sustainability incentives, we have used this in many ways. The way we generate and use electricity is changing, and we play a big part in the transition to a low carbon energy network. So Council's current sustainability incentive scheme provides a range of rebates that build on our previous national first in supporting community investment into sustainable technologies and actions. In 2015, excuse me, for the first battery rebate in through the scheme. And as a result of the success of this rebate, the state government have developed the Home Battery Scheme, which offers similar financial incentives for battery institutions across the state to help grow local battery manufacturing industry. The scheme offers rebate for carbon neutral certification and installation of shared solar PV systems, smart electricity demand management systems, and bidirectional EV charging stations. These are emerging areas of innovation and potential new practices for city businesses, and we're starting to see applications being submitted as the knowledge and capability of the community and the private industry increases. To date, Council has invested over $1 million in incentive funds, which has leveraged more than $10 million in economic output for over 500 projects by both individuals and businesses. And the scheme has a return ratio of about $8, oh, there you go, it's on the slide, $8.35 for every dollar invested by the city. Excuse me. Thank you. Next slide. Procurement. This one is incredibly proud of. We are a major procurement agency, and Adelaide is now the first council in South Australia to use 100% renewable electricity through a power purchase agreement with Flow Energy. As of July 1st this year, if it's run by the Adelaide City Council, it's being powered by renewable energy, which includes all of our council-owned buildings, electric vehicle chargers, barbecues in the parklands, water pumps, street lighting, traffic lights. All of those things are now being powered by renewable electricity. The contract will be delivered from Clements Gap Wind Farm in the mid-north South Australia and 2 new solar farms on the Eyre Peninsula, one in Streaky Bay and one in Penalpin, and these are currently being developed and of course are creating jobs. For me, it was an absolute triple win. We halved emissions, we created new jobs, and we actually made up to 20% savings in our electricity costs. The next one, thanks Jacob, is how we can partner and collaborate, and such as the EV charger project. So partnerships are also a really key component of a sustainable future and sustainable prosperity. So it is an ambitious goal to be a carbon neutral city, and this is a goal shared by the state government and shared by the community and private industry, and we all obviously need to take action if that's going to happen. So as the South Australian grid continues to decarbonise with more renewable energy or electricity entering the mix here, we're paying close attention to the carbon intensity of our transport sector, which currently accounts for 1/4 of our citywide emissions, obviously more in the state. So over the past 3 years, we installed 40 publicly available electric vehicle charging stations, and these are across our U-Park, off-street car park facilities, and also in several on-street parking locations. And of course, now they are powered by renewable electricity. The delivery of the infrastructure was a collaborative effort between South Australia Power Networks, contractors, and of course energy experts, and it's provided a really valuable opportunity for SA the South Australian Power Network to gain an early insight into electric vehicle charging integration through the infrastructure design and also the local demand management. An example of an innovation emerging from the project is a universal pay-wide solution for credit cards that takes away the complexity of navigating different pay systems that is currently the norm overseas. So there's a big opportunity to encourage local innovation for systems that can be rolled out internationally. Thank you. The last slide. So again, as we continue to grapple with the global pandemic, it's really important that we continue to take advantage of the economic, social and environmental opportunities of responding to climate change by continuing to support the uptake of renewable energy and clean, smart technologies. Adelaide can attract new investment to the city, North Adelaide and the state, while creating opportunities for local businesses, innovation and new industries. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that excellent presentation, and it's really fantastic to see all the different areas that are being considered from the council perspective, and really eye-opening. So thank you so much for your time and for all of that awesome, fantastic information.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much. And now we will move on. So our next presenter is Dr. Stephen Hale. Dr. Stephen Hale is a lecturer in economics at the School of Economics at the University of Adelaide and a research scholar at the Global Institute for Sustainable Prosperity. He regularly contributes to economic debates via magazine articles, radio interviews, and podcasts. During the 1990s, Stephen trained bankers, including central bankers and other finance professionals in London, across the UK and internationally. More recently, he has lectured in 4 universities in South Australia, usually in finance or macroeconomics. He's a teaching specialist, an advocate for teaching modern monetary theory to all economics students, and an activist in spreading an awareness of modern monetary theory to the broader public. Dr. Hale is the author of the book Economics for Sustainable Prosperity, which was published in 2018. So if we could please make welcome Dr. Stephen Hale, who I will pass over to so he can make his screen and presentation.
Thanks very much, Jacob.
No problem.
Hopefully this will work. Now, I've got a terrible case of imposter syndrome. What is a financial economist? Somebody who spends most of his time talking about interest rates, exchange rates and fiscal policy, speaking at an event called Sustainable Adelaide, particularly after and before such esteemed speakers with such expertise in this area. Well, I guess I was to justify it. I'd say that I agree with the Oxford economist Kate Raworth when she says that all economists in the 21st century need to be ecological economists. And you might be familiar with, some of you anyway, Kate's book, Donut Economics. It seems like it was published many years ago, but actually it only came out in 2017, within which, when discussing what it means to be sustainable, Kate talked not just about ecological limits on how we go about producing goods and services and which goods and services we consume and how much we can consume in the future, but also talked about the social foundations of a good life and the importance of ensuring that everyone in society enjoys these social foundations, including obvious things like food security and enough income so that people are not living in absolute poverty or not threatened by doing so, and access to education and healthcare and employment opportunities and other things too. But also living within, and I guess this is more obviously applicable at a national level or a global level, the 9 ecological limits which a bunch of natural scientists identified more than 10 years ago now, some of which we are clearly living outside at the moment, and that's particularly true of high-income countries like Australia. So this includes climate change, but not only climate change, biodiversity loss, changes in land use, nitrogen and phosphorus loading, And there are other ecological limits that we're perilously close to at the moment. Since 2017, Kate's worked on a variety of issues and been influential around the world, but particularly I wanted to mention her Sustainable Cities project, where she's worked to shrink the donut concept down to the level of a local community or a city. And a number of cities around the world have embraced this and have developed their own plans for moving towards sustainability based on Kate's donut. Notable amongst these is Amsterdam. So Amsterdam have produced a city plan, which they've called the Amsterdam City Donut. They've worked with Kate on the project. And they've done many other things which, just listening to Sandy, Adelaide City Council has been doing so effectively. But every aspect of council policy in Amsterdam now is supposed to relate to answering a simple question, which is, how can our city be a home to thriving people in a thriving place while respecting the well-being of all people and the health of the whole planet? As Kate's donut model emphasises, there's a social aspect to sustainability as well as an ecological aspect, but every decision that's taken within Amsterdam City Council and how Amsterdam relates to the rest of the Netherlands and to Europe and the world is also supposed to be taken into account. So there's a local aspect and there's a global aspect too. So related questions. I've just taken these from the Amsterdam City Plan and typed in Adelaide instead of Amsterdam. What would it mean for the people of Adelaide to thrive? There are obvious things that that leads you to think about. What would it mean for Adelaide to thrive within its natural habitat? What would it mean for Adelaide to respect the well-being of people worldwide? I see there are questions already in the chat section about trade miles and fair trade and issues like that. And what would it mean for Adelaide to respect the health of the whole planet? And of course, climate neutrality is a crucial issue, but not the only issue there. Now, for me, particularly in Australia, because this is not a one-size-fits-all thing, if the residents of Adelaide and people who work in Adelaide and people right across Australia are to be guaranteed the best opportunity to thrive and have a good quality of life in the future, then we need to take away from them the threat of involuntary unemployment, underemployment, and insecure employment, because these stop people thriving, and they have been a scourge in Australia for the last 40 years. And they've driven an addiction to economic growth as, for the sake of growth, as the only way of keeping unemployment and underemployment down, when instead we should be focusing on ensuring that everybody has access to a decent, fairly paid job with good working conditions. Because when you're unemployed, obviously you suffer financially, but there are dozens, and recently somebody corrected me on this and said hundreds of studies that have been done down the years which have emphasised the non-financial costs of unemployment and underemployment and insecure employment, emotional costs, the impact on people's physical well-being, obviously the loss of social connections within a community, and the fact that when you ask people how satisfied they are with their life and you look at the impact of unemployment, unemployment is one of those negative life events, one of the few negative life events that not only has a significant negative impact on people, but it's a permanent impact. It's not something that people actually adjust to over time. So a second economist, and the second book that I'd like to bring to your attention is a 2020 book by somebody called Pavlina Tcherneva, The Case for a Job Guarantee, which is what I'd like to introduce in Australia. Pavlina designed a successful job guarantee scheme that was in place in Argentina between 2002 and 2006 and should never have been scrapped. And she's also one of the economists behind Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez in the US, where there's been a lot of discussion of job guarantees. What I would like to have in Australia is a situation where we have a public employment service, where if you lost your job, you'd be able to turn up to your local public employment office and there'd be a range of opportunities that you could participate in. And those opportunities should reflect local social needs. Again, it's not one size fits all as far as every community is concerned. If you're thinking already, what jobs could people do? There was a survey that was done by the University of Newcastle more than a decade ago now of local authorities across Australia looking for examples of areas where people could be employed if there was a job guarantee scheme in place which was funded federally. In other words, if finance was not an issue as far as these activities were concerned, and there was no shortage of ideas, and some of these ideas are also discussed in Pavlin's book, which I was just mentioning. So there should be locally a job bank. And if you're unemployed, you should be able to go to a local office of, let's say, a Commonwealth Employment Service. And sure, you should be able to get advice on local job opportunities in the private sector, and they should link up unemployed people with available jobs, and you should be able to get advice on training opportunities too. But on top of that, if you wish to do so, you should have the opportunity to work in the public sector for a decent, fair minimum wage with superannuation, with good working conditions. Now, there's a whole series of questions here. How much will it cost? Well, it depends on the circumstances, really. Under normal circumstances, pre-pandemic, the net cost of running a federal job guarantee probably would have been less than 1% of GDP. It's not a huge amount. How will we pay for it? That's a question which is easier to answer now than it was in the past, because in March this year, the government announced that it was prepared to run more than $200 billion fiscal deficit if necessary to support the economy during a pandemic. And another book I draw to your attention by a dear friend of mine, Stephanie Kelton's Deficit Myth, explains very clearly that in an economy with a monetary system like Australia, there's never a problem finding the dollars at the federal level to finance a program like this. The only issue is whether that finance is inflationary. Won't it cause inflation? Well, it shouldn't cause inflation because the spending on the federal job guarantee will automatically expand and contract counter-cyclically as the economy evolves over time. So when the economy is booming and you're close to full employment, there should be very little spending on the job guarantee because people will transition into higher paid jobs in the private sector or the rest of the public sector in a booming economy. On the other hand, when the economy goes into a recession or during a crisis, then the job guarantee will automatically expand in order to cushion the downturn as people move into the job guarantee, again, taking advantage of the opportunity to remain in employment rather than being involuntarily unemployed under those circumstances, which of course helps them to maintain their incomes and helps to support local economies during a downturn. Is it work for the dole? No, because people in a job guarantee would be fairly paid. They'd have good working conditions. The opportunities available to them should be, let's say, more attractive and more obviously socially productive than work for the dole, which is principally a punitive scheme. And a job guarantee, if it was designed by me, would be optional. So you would have the option to rely on a minimum income payment outside the job guarantee if you didn't want to participate. If you work in the job guarantee, you're going to be better paid and you're going to be more attractive to employers in the future too, because you are still participating in social provisioning and you're turning up and you're being responsible. And remember, the local public employment office has links to local employers, and so you'll be able to link up. Where will we find the useful jobs? There were some just on the slide that I just quickly looked at. We go through them now. Won't it be a bureaucratic nightmare? There is a rural job guarantee in India at the moment, which is 100 times as large as any job guarantee would likely be in Australia under normal circumstances. So we really ought to be able to organise something like this. There isn't time to contrast a job guarantee with a universal basic income. There are reasons why I am not in favour of a universal basic income, although I am in favour of a guaranteed minimum income in the future for people who choose not to participate in a job guarantee. I won't go into it now, but there's no particular reason why you couldn't campaign for both of these policy measures. Well, what about employers? Well, it would mean that employers would have to match the minimum working conditions in the job guarantee, otherwise they wouldn't be able to attract employees. The job guarantee would set minimum standards, not just for wages, but for conditions as well. But in some ways, a job guarantee should be attractive to employers because it sustains demand in the community when there's an economic downturn. And it also means there's a pool of employed people that you can draw on when you're looking for employees when you expand. What if people choose to stay in the scheme? What if the economy starts to grow, but people decide they'd rather, for example, be planting trees or dealing with weeds or helping the elderly to stay independent home for longer than go into the private sector as the economy grows? That's fine as well. The option to remain permanently within the job guarantee is something that I support. How could it be organised? I'm not going to take any more time up, otherwise there won't be enough time for Martin to speak, but organising a job guarantee is something that's perfectly possible to do. If they could do it in Argentina 20 years ago, we could do it now in Australia if we wanted to. The money would have to come from the federal government. As far as the organisation is concerned, there would be a national template, but jobs which were available for people to do locally would be influenced by local government, and local government, in deciding what the priorities are, should be engaging in community consultation forums. And that's our idea for having a federal job guarantee and moving towards getting rid of involuntary unemployment and providing people with a basic human right, and accepting again a commitment which the Australian government made in 1945 but abandoned in the mid-1970s. Thanks very much.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Hale, for your presentation there, and an incredible amount of content delivered in a very concise amount of time, which is that's a talent entirely separate from your economic expertise. So thank you so much for your time. And we best continue moving. So we're going to move on to our third guest, which is Martin Haese, and I'll do my quick introduction, and then we'll begin. Martin Haese is an entrepreneur, an educator, a public figure, and a strong advocate for Adelaide's standing as one of the world's most livable cities. He's currently the Chief Executive Officer of Business SA, Chamber of Commerce and Industry Australia. In 2014, Martin was elected as the 78th Lord Mayor of Adelaide and held that position until November 2018. As Lord Mayor of Adelaide, Martin drove strong sustainability and technology agendas, culminating in the carbon neutral Adelaide 2025, the 10 gigabit Adelaide, one of the world's fastest fibre optic data networks, and many smart city initiatives. He was a guest speaker at the Paris COP21 in December 2015 and continues to advocate that addressing climate change is both an environmental necessity and an economic opportunity. As a musician, he widely promotes Adelaide as a UNESCO City of Music. As a former retail entrepreneur, Martin built and sold a national retail chain prior to becoming the general manager of the Rundle Mall Management Authority. He also holds an MBA and was a guest lecturer for universities and colleges across Australia for several years. And so I'll now hand over to Martin, and I'll get his presentation up, and we will begin.
Thank you, Jacob. Gosh, who wrote that? Thank you, everyone. Lord Mayor and Dr. Hale, thank you very much both for your presentations. I speak to you really wearing two hats, that of Chair of the Premier's Climate Change Council and also Chief Executive of Business SA. But can I first just acknowledge that we meet on Kaurna land, and also can I thank the Sustainable Prosperity Action Group for today's webinar. A great initiative, congratulations and well done. So thank you, Jacob. Next slide. So the Premier's Climate Change Council, and I'll do a very brief introduction about that. Of course, I do sit on that council with the Lord Mayor, but it was established as a piece of legislation in 2007, which is a state-based piece of legislation called the Climate Change and Greenhouse Gas Emissions Reduction Act from 2007. And effectively what we do is that we are the key advisory body to the state government of South Australia on three principal matters: climate change adaptation, climate change mitigation, and also low emissions outcomes for South Australia. And I think you'd all agree they are three critically important outcomes for a wonderful city, a city within a park, which I think is just an extraordinary benefit for Adelaide on its own right. But for a city and a state which since really the mid-2000s has emerged as a global leader in renewables. And I think it's something we can all be very proud of. Thank you, Jacob. So some facts just with regards to South Australia very briefly is that we have decoupled, and that's a very, very important statement to make, and effectively what it means. And it's almost what I would describe globally as the Holy Grail. It's what many, if not all, cities are looking for, is to see a sustainable annual reduction in carbon emissions and also to continue to achieve prosperity and some economic growth. Adelaide and South Australia has managed to do both of that over the last decade. That's why, on many ways, we're held in such high regard on the world stage. We, by 2030, have an interim ambition for a 50% reduction in net emissions from 2005 levels. And also, we'll probably achieve 100% net renewable energy generation in the 2030s also. But this is all on the way to a goal of 2050 for net zero carbon emissions for the state. And truth be told, I hope, and I'm sure you hope too, that that's something we can not only meet, it's something we can actually beat. We have approximately over 50% currently of renewable energy in our grid at any given time. Some days, some weeks, it'll be much higher than that. But if we average it over 2020, it's about 52.1%. But if we look at some vital statistics current in this COVID environment, there's about 1,752 megawatts of projects, renewable energy projects, under construction or already financed for 2020. That equates to about $3 billion worth of investment. That's about 1,500 jobs in various forms. And very importantly, we've now emerged on the national landscape in Australia as a net exporter of renewable energy. And this has changed fundamentally over the last 5 years, where to some degrees, South Australia was vilified for its position on renewables. Now we have emerged as a clear leader and we've been vindicated. Thank you very much, Jacob. The Premier's Climate Change Council, as aforementioned, effectively we influence the consideration of climate change policy at a state government level. We promote climate leadership. We engage with the local government sector. We engage with business and industry about the risks and opportunities. And we assist the state government to prepare a cross-agency climate change strategy, which I'll speak about shortly. And last year we launched a blue carbon strategy, which I'll speak about shortly also. Thank you, Jacob. What are the challenges for South Australia? And I think the first one is one which is not spoken about enough. And it's the public health risk associated with climate change. And we all saw it associated with the late 2019, January 2020 bushfire season in South Australia and around parts of the nation. But this is indeed one of the greatest risks which we have to confront as a society when it comes to climate change, is the risk not only to our environment, which is critical, but the risk, of course, also to ourselves. There's also a food security discussion, so the risk to our agriculture sector, to our fisheries. There's the economic challenges and changes from transitions to low emissions. There's also risks to water security, and also the cost, the greater damage and costs from more frequent and severe bushfires, heat waves, floods and storms. And what we of course all do know is there's a greater variability in extreme weather events. That also plays out in terms of the risks to biosecurity amongst the natural environment. Thank you very much, Jacob. But there are opportunities, and I think we have to look at this through a half glass full lens. We've got to be solutions orientated when it comes to climate change mitigation strategies. What we do know is that South Australia has emerged nationally, if not internationally, as a leader in low emissions outcomes, specifically as a result of the renewable energy sector, which is primarily driven by wind and water. But also, we've got opportunities And this is where South Australia really can do some exciting things in the transport sector, in the agricultural sector, and also from commercial buildings emissions. Because if we look at the fact that renewables contribute about 37% of emissions or emissions reduction over recent years, where the opportunities now are is for us to do better when it comes to driving down emissions through transport. And that's why we're such a great champion of mixed-use transport outcomes, including cycling, but also advanced manufacturing and everything to do with the electric vehicle revolution, including the manufacturing of batteries to support them. We also need to be building resilience within the business community and within our own communities when it comes to climate change, and that could be construed as an opportunity. There are a lot of opportunities emerging in what we would call climate smart agriculture. And that can be in terms of sustainable agricultural practices, and it can also be a result of carbon sequestration coming from the land. And you may have heard of opportunities like organic soil farming, whereby we can, at scale in South Australia, sequester carbon from the atmosphere literally into the soil. There are also opportunities when it comes to algae and coastal seagrasses and producing feedlots for the agricultural sector to reduce methane emissions, because of course methane emissions are also a large contributor of emissions out of the total emissions pie. But if we look at South Australia and we look at Adelaide's livability, one of the top 10 most livable cities in the world, a position that we've managed to hold for some years now, it's a great accolade for South Australia, is that our climate leadership, and certainly I think this only becomes exacerbated in this COVID environment, is that our climate leadership can actually be a source of attracting people to live and to work and to invest into South Australia. We just want them to come here and invest into the right things, the things which are going to protect our environment, sustain our environment. And that's very, very important that we're clear about what that narrative is. Thank you, Jacob. In December last year, the Premier's Climate Change Council, in partnership with the State Government of South Australia, and it was launched by Premier Stephen Marshall, launched a 5-point direction statement for a climate smart South Australia, which is all about unlocking innovation and economic opportunity, reducing emissions, of course, building resilience, providing accessible information, and government leading by example. Thank you, Jacob. And it's very, very important that governments do lead by example. And hence we are working now on a cross-agency climate change strategy, which effectively is shaping out to be a 7-point plan whereby the government departments, through leadership, the government agencies can adopt more sustainable practices in order to, in many ways, show the way for residential communities and also to enable business communities. Thank you, Jacob. And that 7-point plan is all about the continuity of the clean energy transformation. And hydrogen, which many of you would have heard about and read about, is an exciting opportunity, not only for export purposes in terms of hydrogen production in South Australia, but also for domestic consumption of hydrogen, especially within the business sector. Also, growing a climate smart economy. And this whole notion of being a climate smart state, a climate smart place, and having a climate smart economy is very important in the 21st century economy. Low emissions transport is a key outcome which we are advocating to the state government as part of the cross-agency climate change strategy to produce and deliver a modern transport system, one that is people-friendly and environment-friendly. Climate smart cities and towns. So it's important that this climate discussion, these policies, they're not exclusive to the City of Adelaide. They're not exclusive to metropolitan Adelaide. They should be exclusive to South Australia, all of our towns and cities right around our state. Thank you, Jacob. Agriculture and landscapes are particularly important. If we look at the agricultural sector, it produces about $20 billion, which is about 20% of our gross state product every year. And we're already very good. We are a water-wise state because in so many ways, the driest state and the driest continent, we've had to be. But with advanced farming techniques, which are environmentally friendly and environmentally sensitive and environmentally smart, we can harness greater crop yields, we can protect erosion, we can protect water content within soils, we can do so many clever things. And there are a lot of very exciting entrepreneurs in South Australia working on such outcomes right now. Resilient communities, of course, are the fabric of everything I've discussed, and government leading by example to achieve the interim goal by 2030 of 50% reduction on the way to a net zero outcome by 2050 is very important, and government is and must continue at, if not an accelerated rate, to lead by example. Thank you, Jacob. Blue carbon, effectively with over 5,000 kilometres of coastline in South Australia, harnessing our coastal areas, including our mangrove areas, our coastal seagrasses, not only to stabilise our coastal systems from erosion, but also to harvest or to sequester carbon at an accelerated rate, is indeed a very big opportunity in itself. Because coastal seagrasses and mangroves and the like actually sequester carbon at an extraordinarily higher rate than land-based plants. So we've delivered a strategy late last year, which the state government is working on to do exactly that. Thank you very much, Jacob. So thank you very much, everybody, and I look forward to questions.
Well, thank you so much, Martin, for your presentation. And there's lots there for South Australians to be quite proud of, which was really, I felt that was a really great focus of the speech. Yeah, thank you so much. Okay, so we are running surprisingly short of time. However, I would like to make sure that at least we got one question to each of our presenters, and then we'll see how we go from there. So we have been sort of checking through the chat, and we've selected a number of questions. I'm just going to select, I think I'll go back in order of the presentation. So one of the earlier questions that we got for the Lord Mayor was, how can we encourage landlords, and I guess we could expand that to homeowners in general, but how can we encourage landlords to take up solar and battery technology on their properties, presumably?
Well, there's been a raft of sustainable incentive schemes over several years now. That was for solar, take up of solar, and also, as I said, the battery scheme that's now been taken up by the state government. So those sustainability incentive schemes actually exist for homeowners to try and use. Okay, brilliant.
Thank you so much. Okay, I'll give the next question to Dr. Hale. So we had a question regarding, could the Job Active network, which currently is tasked with making unemployed people, but job ready. Yeah, sorry, I'll start that again. Could the Job Active network, which is currently tasked with making unemployed people job ready, be made into a job bank, the kind of policy proposal that you were talking about in your presentation?
In principle, yes. In practice, it's not worked very well, and it has a very poor reputation with a lot of participations with it. That doesn't mean every organisation that's been involved in it has a poor reputation, but if I'd been in Australia, I would never have been in favour, first of all, of the shift towards a punitive approach to the unemployed that took place in this country 30 years ago. Secondly, the subsequent phasing out of the Commonwealth Employment Service. I see no reason not to develop the Commonwealth Employment Service again, and it may be essential because lots of people that have interacted with the Job Active network have a very poor experience of it, and organisations that I work with, including in the union movement, are very negative about it. So it's very difficult to be positive about it in the future.
Thank you very much. I'll give the next question to Martin Haese. And so this question was, COVID-19 has highlighted our dependence on goods manufactured overseas. Do you think that manufacturing self-sufficiency is an important goal for Australia? And if so, how might that be achieved?
Thanks, Jacob. That's a really topical question. And I'll put my Business SA hat on because we represent about 17 industry sectors. So we get a lot of feedback about kind of what industry participants are doing and in what kind of sectors they're doing it. There's no doubt about it that a lot of business owners are refocusing their supply chains. And whether they're doing that through just simply looking to diversify their risk or spread their risk, they may have had many of their eggs in one basket. And we've certainly seen a great deal of evidence of that. We're also seeing a lot of innovation from, I think, South Australia's small to medium-sized enterprise sector, who are really looking at doing, I think, some interesting things in areas like the circular economy. And they're actually coming up with almost new businesses altogether. As troubling as COVID-19 and as disruptive as what it has been, and as scary as what it has been from a health perspective, from a business perspective, we're seeing some kind of some green shoots, I think, beginning to come out the other end, because maybe it's just necessity has become the mother of all invention, and people are just more willing to try new things. And I think a lot of this is also being led by a bit of a different focus on consumer demand. I think the way that we consume, I think we're questioning that a little bit. I think we're becoming more discerning about what we buy and where we buy it from and all these types of things. And I think that's really influencing the marketplace. So I think what we're going to see from literally 2020 onwards, and I almost hope for many years to come, is I think a stronger kind of more conscious consumerism. And I think that's going to materially impact upon what we make in South Australia, what we grow in South Australia. It doesn't mean that we'll go literally from A to B with nothing in between, whereby we would have been, maybe overly reliant on overseas supply chains and we'll revert right back to a local supply chain exclusively. That won't happen. But I think the pendulum will move, and I think it will move a little more towards the centre, whereby those who are importing goods will spread their risk accordingly across various countries. I think we'll see local entrepreneurs begin to make more things, grow more things, develop more things, take some more risks that they may not have done in the past. And I think we'll see a consumer group who are ready for that. So in many ways, as daunting as what 2020 has been, and I hope I'm not being a half glass full optimist all of the time, but I do think there are some green shoots coming out the other end, and we may even be better off for it in the longer run.
Well, thank you very much. And yeah, no complaints about the glass half full approach. I think we need as much of that as possible. Okay, I'll do another round of questions because everyone was so fantastically concise with their responses. I'll give this one to the Lord Mayor. It is slightly adversarial, so I'll warn that ahead of time. But it references a Drivers Month program. I'm not personally across that, but they ask, how does Drivers Month contribute to achieving the carbon neutral objectives of the council?
Well, it doesn't, to be perfectly honest, but it is a thing where we are also aware that 80% of the people that come into the city to shop and to use services do come in by car. At the moment, I'm working with the state government on a city access strategy, which is a future strategy for how we integrate all forms of transport. So that is looking at train networks, tram networks, cycling networks, pedestrian networks, and of course, cars. I mean, I'm very clear in my head that even though, one of our revenue generators is our car park business, that is very time limited, and we are looking for what the next revenue streams are, because it won't be in car parking. So, we are trying to encourage further uptake of electric cars, of course, but that was obviously something brought to the chamber by one of our councillors, Jesse Kerr. He was looking to businesses. He was also looking to the fact that we have got UPark Plus, which is a contactless sort of convenient car parking card, and also the parking app. So it's sort of to bring those things together in 1 month to try and actually get more more shopping in the city.
Thank you very much. And I think that does address what I'm sure the questioner was looking for. Okay, I'll move on to another question for Dr. Hale, and it refers to a Stephanie Kelton book, which you did mention. The timing is quite interesting because, of course, she was on the drum last night, for those that tuned into the drum. So it lined up quite well with with our webinar. So it's almost like, I'd like to say we planned it, but certainly that wasn't the case. But so in Stephanie Kelton's book, she discusses how we focus on certain types of deficits, which they say is the federal government's budget, and we ignore other kinds of deficits which exist in society. So in your mind, if you're prepared to speak on it, what are the deficits that do matter, and how can those deficits be resolved?
Well, I think the current and former Lord Mayors have discussed some of this very effectively, and I would like to, as someone who is one of the people probably responsible for this organisation existing, because it sort of goes back to our conference in January, I'd like to thank them both very, very much for participating this evening, and thank you all for organising it as well. But there's a whole set of deficits. There's the jobs deficit, which I was talking about. We have not been remotely close to full employment in Australia since 1975. That's when we last had full employment in this country. That's when there were not a lot of people who were involuntarily unemployed. For example, the climate change deficit, the ecological deficit in general. It has been said that in countries like Australia, we are per capita using up so much of the world's resources that we would need 5 planets to continue living like this indefinitely. But there were a whole series of other deficits. Basically, she argues in the book that an inappropriate obsession with budget surpluses has stopped federal governments in countries like the US and Australia addressing things which really matter. And if we were talking about at the state level for the moment, I don't know whether he's in the audience this evening, but my friend and colleague Phil Lawn calculated for the Labor state government, Australia's genuine progress indicator. And if we want to big up our state just for a moment, the genuine progress indicator takes into account a set of economic and social and ecological indicators. And Phil's work demonstrated that based on the GPI, which is similar to the happiness index people have been talking about in the questions, that although on a gross state product per capita basis, South Australia is below the average for Australia, when you look at a measure like the Genuine Progress Indicator, which is a better measure of well-being for a variety of reasons, actually this is the place to live in this country. So there you are, I'm being half glass full. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. I can't get enough of it. Thank you so much. I've got, I think we'll just ask, we have reached the time limit. I don't want to stretch our guests any further. Thank you so much for your generous contribution. I'll give Martin one more question to be fair. So this is a question just asked simply, is there an optimum population level for South Australia in your eyes?
Thanks, Jacob. I'll be brief. I don't know, to be honest. Is that we've kind of, and I'll put my business SA hat on here, is that we're advocates of moderate population growth. But in so many ways, if you look at South Australia, if you look at Adelaide's population globally, it's already quite significant. Adelaide, at its current size, is not a small city when it comes to, I think with the Lord Mayor would probably know this better than I, but I think we're probably, if you looked at us in comparison to the US, Adelaide would be the 10th largest city in the United States of America with the current population that it has now. So I don't think it really equates to the fact that you've got to have a large population in order to have a great city at all. It's in so many ways, medium-sized cities are where you can preserve your livability absolutely the best places to live in. And I think Adelaide, that puts us so well positioned. So what we advocate is just for moderate yet sustainable population growth. We don't look for population decline, but we don't look for rampant population growth either, because that could compromise to some degree what makes Adelaide wonderful.
Thank you so much. Okay, well, I think we've, I'd just like to, I think we'll conclude there because I don't want to push our generous guests any further, but thank you so much to all three of you for your time. It's been fantastic. So if anyone in the audience would like to express their gratitude, they can do so via virtual clapping. That would be wonderful, just to let us know.
Thank you. It's been lovely, and I can see so many people I know in those screens. It's lovely to see you all. So, you know, and I think from all of the speakers, you know, we are all doing what we can, and we need everybody's help to make this happen. So, but thank you for organising. It's been great to be part of it.
Yes, no problem. Well, what I'll do is I'll just conclude with a tiny little piece of a bit of information about the webinar organisers ourselves for people that are interested in any future events that we're putting on, and then we'll say goodbye. So I'll just quickly share my screen to this. So we do have another webinar coming up very soon. It's Jobs, Work, Justice and Gender in the Pandemic. And it's a webinar that's exploring how the pandemic is affecting women and men, especially at work, and the potential for bad politics and policy to turbocharge inequality. And so we've got some guest speakers there that are listed that will be going through those issues. And you can see the date there. The actual webinar is going to be hosted on this same account or channel. I'm not exactly sure the word that's used for Zoom, but this thing that you're on currently. And there's the time and date. So if you'd like to record that down for yourself, if you're interested, I'll leave that on the screen for a second for people. Yes. Okay, I'll just move to the next slide. If you would like to be part of a mailing list where you'll be getting more information about events such as this one, if you write and send an email to that address there, you'll be put into the chain of emails where you get further information. If you are interested in some of the concepts and ideas that Dr. Hale was talking about, there are a couple of links there that you can follow as well with some information about modern monetary theory and the job guarantee. And on the final slide, we've recently created a website, and when I say recently, it would be within 24 hours, but we've recently created a website for the Sustainable Prosperity Action Group, where you can find information about similar events such as these, where we'll be tackling issues of sustainability, ecology, and also the economics associated with those. So if you'd like to visit, that would be another place where you can find all of the latest information.
I literally just built that site today, and if you log in next week, it might look quite different, but it's got it's got the information about our next webinar and just a bit about us and what we're trying to achieve. I'll just type it into the chat as well. Oh,
excellent. People can copy paste. Okay, well that concludes the webinar for today. I'd like to just again extend one more thanks to our guests for their time and their expertise and their contributions, and they put a lot of effort in with just even preparing for their presentations, the slides and all the information, and it really offered a rich amount of information from a number of perspectives for our audience. So if we could give one final round of applause, and I'll sign off on that note.
Thanks, Jacob. Thanks, everybody. And thanks, Gabby. You are a dynamo. Thanks for everything you're doing.
Thank you. Yes, we have a YouTube channel. It's the Sustainable Prosperity YouTube channel. You can find it from our website, and we will put the recordings there. Might also share them on Facebook under the event information. So you'll be able to get access to that. And you can always email me or give me a call. My number's on the registration email. If you want to know more about what we do, if you're chasing up something in particular from tonight, always happy to help.
Thank you, everybody.
No problem.
Thank you. Good night.
if you'll forgive my lack of professionalism for a second, Gabby, should I just essentially hang up the call?
No, just stay on. That's all right. We'll just. It's a bit like a party, Jacob. You've got to wave to people.
That's true. That's true.
Bye. Thanks for joining us. I could probably stop the recording though. I will do that.